Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond, powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Greetings, friends of Steering Change. Today we're kicking off part one of a three-part series, The Road Beneath, Ethics, Exploitation, and Accountability in Trucking, in which we're pulling back the curtain on the trucking and logistics industry, starting where real prevention begins, the decisions made at the top. We examine how carrier vetting, driver Inc. models, and LMIA abuse allow labor exploitation to persist, and how these practices intersect with human trafficking. Beyond exposing the system, this series will center on human trafficking awareness by amplifying the voices of drivers, advocates, and ethical industry leaders working on the front lines. Through real stories and proven solutions, we show that ethical pathways forward are not theoretical, they're already happening. Behind the wheel, beyond the silence, this series asks who we trust and what it truly means to protect people. Now, let's get into part one. Trucking in Canada, and especially here in Alberta, is a tough, high-stakes industry. It keeps our shelves stocked, our energy sector moving, and our economy functioning. But let's be clear, it's not always sunshine and roses. With an aging workforce and the challenges around attracting new talent to sit behind the wheel, we're facing a serious shortage of qualified, competent drivers. Over the years, we've seen a rise in practices that undermine safety and fairness across the industry. Licensing fraud, driver Inc., and chameleon carriers re-emerging under new names are just a few of the issues our industry is faced with today. Add to that the exploitation of workers through misuse of the temporary foreign worker program, and you start to see a system that, when left unchecked, rewards the wrong behavior. This doesn't just hurt drivers, it puts the public at risk, distorts competition, and penalizes the carriers and shippers who are doing things the right way. If we want a trucking industry that is safe, sustainable, and respected, we have to stop pretending these problems don't exist. Accountability has to extend beyond the cab and into the boardroom, the shipping dock, and the entire supply chain. Knowing who is hauling your freight isn't optional anymore, it's a responsibility. Today we're sitting down with a national shipper who not only operates a private fleet, but also works closely with external carriers across their network to move everyday essentials. We'll be talking about best practices in carrier partnerships, why brand protection goes beyond logos and marketing, and why knowing exactly who is hauling your freight matters more than ever. I'd like to start by welcoming today's guest, Dave Hewlett, Director of National Safety and Compliance with Loblaws. Dave, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are also joined with someone bringing his own industry experiences to the table, and that is AMTA Senior Advisor of Member Solutions, Doug Walton. Doug, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Kelsey. Appreciate you being here.
We'll start with some get-to-know-yous. Dave, you first. Can you tell us a bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, so I've been with Loblaws since 2002. Done a wide variety of different positions up in the warehouse. Actually started out swamping rice containers way back when. And then progressively moved up through different positions, running shipping, trailer maintenance. And for the past decade or so, I've been heavily involved in the safety and compliance space, which is what I would like to say is my true calling. I enjoy it every day.
Fantastic. And Doug and I get to work closely with Dave through the Driver Appreciation Days. So as always, Dave, we appreciate the efforts that Loblaws puts towards that event as well. Moving on to you, Doug, can you tell us a bit about your work with AMTA?
Sure can. Senior advisor of our member solutions team. So my team and I are out meeting with members, obviously connecting with industry, listening to pain points, trying to find solutions to everyday problems for them, and connecting them with some of our subject matter experts within the AMTA, or certainly have those relationships outside the organization, either with law enforcement or government to support industry as well. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. So, Dave, let's dive right in. When you hear the statement, knowing who is hauling your freight isn't optional anymore, it's a responsibility. What does that mean for you and Loblaws today?
Well, I think that responsibility is the key word in that question. I definitely think that shippers assigning a load share the responsibility getting the freight to its destination safely. We didn't know, or we didn't know what that carrier was up to isn't an acceptable excuse anymore. And so it's really important to know who's hauling your freight. It's all about protecting your company reputation and, just as importantly, protecting the image of trucking in the industry overall. To me, the selection of carrier partner is important, but you also have to have that ongoing monitoring of your partner. The days of just onboarding a carrier, signing the contract, and leaving them to it to execute shipments daily, it's just not acceptable anymore.
And you did touch on this a bit, but when you think about that responsibility in practice, how does it show up in the way Loblaws vets carriers, monitors performance, and holds partners accountable over time? Are there maybe expectations that exist today that maybe didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago?
For sure. I think the industry's changed a lot over the past 5 or 10 years. I think we can all agree that that's the case. I think back to sort of what's referred to as the good old days, but they were the bad old days, is what they were, of late Friday afternoon with the yellow pages on my desk, cold calling anyone that says trucking in their name, trying to find somebody to get on that load. We made a substantial shift back in the early 2010s, so 2011, 2012, putting a lot more effort into building partnerships with our core carriers and switching that from like a vendor relationship to an actual partnership. Today, we have minimum standards on a number of areas, including performance, professionalism, safety, obviously, insurance, WCB, all those things. We vet all these on a quarterly basis, and the carrier partners, they're involved in those conversations regarding those metrics.
And you touched on safety there. I had the opportunity to tour your facility out at Balzac, so I've kind of seen this firsthand. Can you touch on how you would define a strong safety culture in a carrier operation?
So the important distinction for me is it has to be a safety culture, not a safety plan. Safety plans are great. Everybody needs one. I've seen many, many well-written ones over my time. But if you don't follow it, then there's no use to it. So it's about the culture. And in order to have a successful safety culture, it has to start from the top, and everyone has to buy in and believe in the process. Some things I would look at when initially vetting a carrier is, their training, their initial training, their ongoing training, that open communication, professionalism, etc. And then, of course, safety ratings, proper insurance, and a deep dive of NSC profiles. When I look at specific offenses, but more importantly, if there's been a problem with speeding with hours of service compliance, what are they doing to improve that? And are they actually striving for continuous improvement? That's what actually matters.
Thanks, Dave. And kind of sticking with that same piece, what are some of the key safety or compliance factors you look at when deciding whether to work with a carrier? Is there more to it than just reviewing a carrier profile or COI?
Yeah, there's a lot more. We obviously look at the usual stuff, licensing, operating authorities, WCB, insurance, national safety code, all of that. But in order to build that strong partnership, there are many other things we look at for compatibility. Alignment with our company values, carrier's reputation, do they have a proven track record of improvement, etc. We understand that people are going to make mistakes. It's trucking. It happens. Unfortunately, it happens daily. But how you handle that mistake or that error means a lot more than, whoops, we made an error. All of our successful partners, they all start on probation with us, where we have the opportunity to work closely with them to ensure they're able to actually achieve our standards and also to verify they can execute on their contractual obligations. It's easy to tell me that I can do all this stuff, but you actually have to show me.
I'll just ask a quick question. What could partnering with the wrong carrier do, to affect your brand, for instance?
As you're aware, in a very negative way. Any mistake in trucking these days is broadcasted extremely quickly. Media, social media, word of mouth, it all travels at light speed these days. All these posts or stories that are out there has a very negative effect on public perception. Ultimately, this can have a devastating effect on your company brand, your vendor, and more importantly, your customer relationships.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And Doug, let's stick with you to ask Dave a few more questions here.
Sure. I'll shift some gears, Dave.
Yeah,
trucking fun. It has to be an automatic because I haven't shifted a manual in a long time. I'll probably just be scratching gears. But anyway, moving on. When we talk about industry, the most important assets, which are our drivers, in my opinion, when we think about the long-term sustainability of our industry, would you agree it starts with taking care of those behind the wheel?
Yeah, absolutely. So these days, attracting professional drivers to your company, it's so important. But I believe the real trick in all of this is obviously retaining your colleagues. We just do little things like they're not drivers to us. They are colleagues. They're the same as anybody, right? They're a dispatcher, they're a manager, they're an ops manager. They're just a colleague. We're all trying to get the job done together. And when you treat them that way, they respond favorably to it, in my experience, right? The other thing is, if you're able to demonstrate that you're a great place to work, the word gets out in the industry and it inevitably attracts professional and safe-minded drivers to come apply to your company. So it's something that you can absolutely leverage. And we've had some great success with that over the years.
I know you and I are very aligned on that, but when we look at the reputable fleets, like, your private fleet, placing a greater emphasis on driver health and wellness, whether that be, in-cab technologies to keep them safer, road safer, better training, higher wages, increased benefits, the list goes on. Do you feel it has made a difference for you when shifting that focus onto the driver and trying to give them a better work-life balance even?
Yes, it's obviously changing the industry for the better. I will say we still collectively have a lot more work to do in this space, but it is getting better for sure. There's been a shift over the past number of years where, pay is still extremely important to people, but there's other factors that, they're just as important these days. Things when you think about flexibility, your work-life balance, benefits programs, stability in the work, consistency in the work. Those are all very, very important to people these days that are out there driving the trucks. And then equipment, it makes a huge difference, right? Well-maintained trucks, proper ELD systems, safety features that are built into the truck, and overall comfort, they make a huge difference and attract people in.
For sure, but those initiatives come at a cost, right? That's none of that stuff. Well, how you treat your people, how you talk to them, all that's free. You can do that for no cost, but all the other things definitely impact, the bottom line. And when we see that, carriers obviously have to pass those costs along, and that could be in terms of rates to the customer, the shipper. But with that said, we have carriers that aren't doing those things, that we're seeing them getting business by lowering rates because they're not investing in their people or in the safety programs and their maintenance programs, like you mentioned. Schemes like Driver Inc., for instance, or we've seen abuse in the temporary foreign worker program. Just overall, people taking advantage of people, really, and enabling themselves to reduce those rates by up to 20-30%. When you hear about companies like that they're not operating with safety programs or WCB or inadequate training, and again that list can go on as well. Do you feel those carriers that are winning the business today, how is that impacting road safety as a whole? When those carriers are out earning that business ahead of the carriers that are doing things the right way.
It's a tough time. I think we can all agree it's great what's happening with the government cracking down on Driver Inc. and some of these programs. We've been talking about it for a decade and the effect that it has on the industry. So, choosing solely on price, in my experience, it's never turned out well. Choosing your partner is the key. So we found instances in the past of, prices on RFQs that may be too good to be true. However, it's important that you investigate that a little bit because we have found some legitimate reasons for this. Now, not in the majority of cases, but in some, people that are trying to get their equipment back home and, they have a deadhead or something like that. So there is an ability there to have a bit of a lower rate. But if you have those lower across the board rates, that's where it gets tricky. Another thing that we notice out in the industry sometimes is, we'll have a 10 truck operation that is bidding on some work, and they'll tell me they can do 100 loads a week. So, those are the sort of things that we have to look at these days, and we have a responsibility to look at these things. That said, Doug, most times when a rate is too good to be true, it really is. And they're only able to achieve these rates because they're cutting costs somewhere else, like you said. Safety, maintenance, hours of service violations. There's unfortunately competitive advantage today due to risky behavior. That's why selection is the most important thing. So it's so important from a shipper. If we continue to reward these bad actors out there with lanes and keep them employed, it becomes very difficult to change their behavior. One accident, as you're well aware, can destroy years worth of savings on a lower rate.
Absolutely.
Not to mention the damage to your reputation and brand, which is arguably far more expensive in the long run, in my opinion.
Well, this is a big pain point out in the industry because I receive calls, it's in discussions daily about it, when carriers that are out doing the right things, that have all the safety culture, and you talk right from the top down, and they're taking care of their people, and they go to their customer. And this is a call I got not too long ago from a friend in the industry who, it's a family-run business. They've been in business a long time, and they said, Doug, I've been servicing this customer for 10 years. I haven't given my drivers an increase. I've been trying to maintain rates. We know, capacity is up and rates are down, so we're trying not to ruffle any feathers, but I have to pass along a bit of an increase to my drivers. So they went to the customer and said, look, I just need to bump a little bit up so I can give it to my drivers. These are the drivers that have been servicing your account for many, many years. And unfortunately, within a few days, they lost the business, and they lost it to a company that they know are running substandard equipment, driver Inc. model. And, that person making those decisions needs to understand that how that impacts and flows down, right? He or she and their families travel the same roads that you and I do. So when they're investing in those partner carriers, they really have to ask those questions. Why is the rate lower? What are they doing? So I appreciate you talking about that. I know it went on a little bit of a rant there, but it's important that we understand who we're partnering with. And from your perspective, how much responsibility should shippers and brokers really take in making sure that the carriers that are working with are operating ethically, and that drivers, are properly trained, paid, and protected?
So I think it's a shared responsibility for sure. We all have a vested interest in road safety. So taking a look at the bigger picture is always the best thing to do. And do you want these carriers representing your brand? Do you want them, delivering the product to your stores, to your customers? We need to be mindful of, there's always a line too, Doug. You and I used to talk about this in your previous life where, look, like I can offer advice. I can provide you with what we think is good. But I'm not going to manage your company for you. So you have to be mindful of that.
Right.
That's why the vetting and the selection is just so important. You have to be comfortable entering into a partnership with a carrier and to trust they're going to represent your company and your values. At the end of the day, your carrier partners are the last line of defense for your company. And despite whose name's on the door, they're still representing your company, right?
Absolutely. Would you agree that our shippers and our brokers, they have the greatest opportunity to affect change, though, through proper vetting?
We control the freight, so yes. If the bad actors in the industry are not going to be given the freight, they only have a couple choices. Either take a look at their company, make the necessary changes to become a responsible professional carrier, or they don't get the freight and they can't survive long term.
Sure. And if you were, I guess, looking to give some advice to other national shippers, who are reviewing their carrier network today, what would you tell them to prioritize when looking at those carriers that they're partnering with?
Yeah, so I look at a number of different things when I'm vetting a potential partner. Safety culture, the reputation of the carrier, their maintenance programs, reliability, their performance. And then another really important one is transparency and open communication. We all understand people are going to make mistakes in this space, but you have to have that open dialogue with your partner to be able to, have that conversation and affect change together. So the other important part is once you hired your partner and they've, signed the bottom line on the contract, you trust, but you verify. So that's where ongoing monitoring is so important. Meet with your partners and listen to them. Actually listen to them. They have a unique perspective of being on the road day in and day out. They may have ideas on efficiency or cost-saving opportunities that a shipper just might not see. Work with them, offer advice, and build a partnership together.
That is awesome. Dave and Doug, I want to thank you both for being here today. And as always, we certainly appreciate your insights. I do want to wind things up with one final question for you both. I will start with you, Dave. Is there anything you'd like to add on our chat today?
Just thanks for the opportunity, Kelsey. I think that, this is such an important piece of the industry, and there's a bit of a mind shift going on. So I really appreciate the chance, or just having the chance to speak with the AMTA and all the members today, because this is something that I'm very passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. And Doug, is there anything you'd like to add on your end?
Well, Dave, thanks for being here. Obviously, you and I go back a ways, maybe when we're wet behind the ears and learning, the industry together, but I appreciate it, how you've worked with me over the years and watching you grow at Loblaws to the role that you hold now today has been great. I just want to celebrate you a little bit and the impact that you're having on the industry. I think, again, just a message out to those shippers, just again, hear what Dave's saying when you're talking about who you're really wanting to partner with. Deep dive, ask the right questions, make sure that those carriers are not just selling you a bill of goods, is that they're legit, they're there to haul your freight and work with you, but do it ethically and safely. It's going to make everybody's day a lot better. When you invest in those right carriers, and it the most expensive carrier isn't going to have maybe the safest fleet, but ask the right questions. It's going to make a difference in how we operate this industry.
Well put.
Thank you both again for your insight and knowledge on this topic that is very important to industry today. For our listeners, The Road Beneath, Episode 2, Driver Inc., the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and Success Stories from the Front Lines drops February 27th, so stay tuned. Let's close with some news. Please note, Canada's National Human Trafficking Awareness Day is February 22nd, a day set aside to educate the public about modern slavery and actions to combat human trafficking. There are a number of events and initiatives taking place around February 22nd, so be sure to check out the show notes. AMTA's 88th Annual Conference takes place April 22nd to 23rd at the Grey Eagle Event Centre in Calgary. Join us for a jam-packed program covering industry, enforcement, communication, and the impacts of artificial intelligence, as well as our awards dinner, trade show, and more. Registration details are available at amta.ca. And new to AMTA is the My AMTA Rewards Program. Designed to deliver exclusive promotions, discounts, and value-added offers from participating My AMTA Rewards partners, we encourage you to learn more and email rewards@amta.ca today. Do you have any questions or comments about the Steering Change episodes? Reach out on our Instagram at AMTA_CA or LinkedIn and Facebook at Alberta Motor Transport Association. Stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Did you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram with the hashtag SteeringChange, and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.